me. Okay, cool. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Now that I have everything set up, and again, if someone takes a look at this, please let me know if we have sound or if anyone's awake to watch this, because I know it's rather early in the morning and I immediately regretted committing to this time. But if you do, whoever sees this first, just let me know if we have sound, because it's helpful to me, and then hopefully I can fix it if there isn't any sound. So I put up a poll like 2-ish days ago on some topics, and the different forms of anxiety had the most votes, so that's just what we're going to go with for today. I did some research for once, so that's a shocker. But we're going to start off with the social anxiety one, just because that's what I did research on. And then if we have time, we're going to go into the performance stuff. But yeah, this can be found, a lot of this information can be found on, the website title is akfsa.org. I'll drop a comment for it later. But they describe social anxiety as an intense fear of being judged by others, and is normally characterized by the emotions of shame, humiliation, and embarrassment. And people who suffer from social anxiety are unable to like push past those emotions, because everyone to a certain extent experiences shame or humiliation in public, or be like nervous about public situations. But for the most part, we can push past those. People who experience social anxiety can't push past that. And then they also talked about too is that you can experience anxiety from a situation that you're worried about. It could be like weeks or months away. So if you get like invited to a party or maybe something like that. And then the website also talked about how the symptoms kind of existed on a continuum. So there's some that are severe, and then there's some that are less severe. And then they also put through 2 different symptoms for like age groups, so like children, adolescents, and then adults. I looked up the adult symptoms. I don't know if being 21 is considered being an adult or not in the medical field, but that's what we're going to go with. So some of the symptoms, at least for social anxiety for adults, is the fear of being noticeably nervous. So that would be like other people noticing that you're nervous. Obsessive worrying over social interactions. Thanks, Kyle, for letting me know the sound. I appreciate you. So yeah, obsessive worrying over social interactions or performance situations. You have a tendency to use like technology to avoid interaction. You can have a dependence on substances that function in performance-based interactions. And then something else that I found kind of interesting with the site too is they called it the I don't know what to say syndrome. So I guess if you're like trying to like talk to someone, you don't necessarily know what to say. And then some symptoms for like all ages. It's just a fear of social or performance settings, and the fear of being embarrassed or humiliated with both of those. And then social situations that can provoke severe anxiety and panic attacks, or avoiding social situations, and any of that stuff that causes you to disrupt your normal routine. So that's kind of, again, that's a lot of information to like go down as I'm reading, but I'm committed to doing research for this for once, unlike normally. So that's some of the stuff the site listed as things that can be like triggers. And then 2, just symptoms of social anxiety. It can be stuff like excessive sweating, blushing, muscle twitches, dry mouth, difficulty swallowing, which is what I'm kind of experiencing, increased heart rate, shaking, dizziness, shortness of breath. So yeah, those are some symptoms for it. One of the things the site talked about too It's just that like not everyone's the same, so you might not experience all this stuff. And then again, at least for the next part, the site gave some examples too, just for different triggers or things that can set people off. And that include like speaking or reading in public, eating in public, writing in public, being introduced to new people, trying to forge friendships or romantic relationships, dating, social encounters with strangers, dropping or spilling something, or even using like public restrooms. So at least while I was like reading through this, at least from the site, or kind of like researching or trying to do a little bit of research, at least for myself, I kind of came to the conclusion, because I think that sometimes I can be a little bit socially awkward. But for me, I'm definitely not on the scale of what this would be. And I have some friends that I know that experience social anxiety. And I know for me personally, at least even just listening to them or like being friends with them in different situations, sometimes they would react really negatively to something, and I wouldn't always understand why. It just like wouldn't make sense to me, or I wouldn't like know how to react, or I wouldn't know how to help them, just because they were panicking, and I couldn't understand why they were panicking. And even now, like reading through a lot of these situations, like I can say for me personally, like I don't get like, especially for like some of like the trigger situations that they gave examples of, I don't really get nervous about like that sort of thing, or those like that stuff, I guess. But I have friends that do, and one of the things they kind of recommended, at least if you do experience social anxiety as like a mental illness, is one to like go to therapy, because an actual therapist can help you. And again, like it's different for everyone. So like the symptoms and like situations and triggers and that sort of thing, it might not be affecting you specifically. So they recommended going to therapy. And then they also said there's different forms of like social skills training. I didn't get as much time to research that. And then there's also medications for social anxiety too. Again, I can't comment on that too much, but if you see a therapist, they'd probably be able to help you with that. And the one other key fact for social anxiety, at least again as a mental illness, they kind of classified it as a disease of resistance, which again I kind of found interesting. That's where the person is embarrassed to like seek help, or they don't know where to begin. I think that can kind of hold true for a lot of people, just with different mental illnesses too. Most people don't want to get help or seek help or find help. And I know I experienced that just with depression. So again, at least for me personally, I can't quite comment on the full extent of social anxiety, just because I don't think I experienced that. But again, everyone to a certain extent experiences some small amount of social anxiety. So that I can talk about a little bit, just because I think everyone can. Probably some of the more silly, well, not silly, but I've been intimidated to talk to people before. Not everyone knows these stories. I think some people do, but I think it's kind of funny, or I can look back on it fondly now, and I'm not really embarrassed about it. But one of the things I would do, if there's people that I was like intimidated to talk to, I used to, there's a few people I can think of where I asked advice of like their friends, like on how to talk to them, which is really funny when you think about it now. Trying to think of who I could name. I think I could talk about this because Zach's pretty cool. I won't say who I was intimidated by, but I was talking to Zach. He's a musician, super friendly guy, really cool. And there is someone he was friends with. I was intimidated to talk to, and I was at a party, so I had been drinking a little bit, so I was a little bit more loose. I find when I drink alcohol, I only drink a little bit. It's not like I'm intoxicated or anything, but I am a little bit more socially relaxed. But I was talking to him, and I was like, oh yeah, I want to like go talk to your friend. And I'm like, oh, but I don't know what to say. I'm like nervous. And he was just like, oh, you should like talk to him about this. He like loves this. And then he like immediately called his friend over. but I failed in the social interaction, unfortunately, because I got nervous and didn't say anything. So that was that interaction. And then the other kind of big social thing where I can think of where I was like awkward is one of the first parties I went to as a freshman. And I think everyone can attest to, at least when they're in a new situation or like they really don't know anybody at like a party or something, they tend to be like more anxious or nervous or like worried about talking to people. This was one of the first parties I went to as a freshman. I think it was actually during the fall semester, but I had gone with Wes and Owen, who are both my friends, and they're like social butterflies. And at that point, I was pretty shy, and didn't really like talking to people, which I'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, anyways, we got to the party, and there's like all these people there, and they were like all upperclassmen that I didn't talk to, and I was like scared of talking to. Like immediately, like Owen and Wes, like they walk in, and everyone's like, "Hey, what's up?" And then they just like both go off, and then meanwhile I'm like still standing at like the doorway, like super awkward, and like my first thought was just to like leave. Like leave now, leave immediately. And I was like gonna turn around and just like walk out the door again, because like my two friends just like abandoned me. But then unfortunately Hayden saw me, and he was just like, "Amy," he's like, "What's up?" And he's like, "Come on in." And like my fate was like sealed. I was like couldn't leave, and I was very awkward and didn't really succeed at talking to anybody. I was very shy about talking to people at that. Yeah. Again, those are more like fond memory situations, I would say. At least now that I'm a senior. Oh wait, actually I'll talk about this other part first. For those other like situations before I go into the now, I would say most of my social anxiety is more of an offset. Not really sure what the word is. I was never good at English. Was more of a symptom, I would say, of my depression. Not so much that I experienced social anxiety as like a mental illness, but more so that I was extremely depressed. So social interactions were more of a self-worth type of thing, which means like I avoided like conversations with other people just because I was really depressed, or I didn't think I should be talking to them. Or if they were like a musician that was really good, I didn't feel like I was like worth it to talk to, or like more of that sort of thing. And when I went to like therapy with depression and worked through that, a lot of that went away. So that's the one thing I wanted to say about that. But yes, now I talk to people now. A lot of people, I think, at least that knew me when I was a freshman, would probably say that I was pretty shy. Again, shyness doesn't equate to social anxiety by any extent. Again, to like reiterate that. So I think, one, if you knew me when I was a freshman, you could probably attest to how I've changed. But for freshmen now that might be watching this or might be watching this later, one of the things I do now, especially in situations that I'm really comfortable with, so like Irian, like that community, I'm like very comfortable with at this point. In the jazz department, I'm very comfortable with because I know everyone. When I notice like new people, like I talk to them now, especially if they're like alone or like by themselves. I'm sure some of the freshmen can attest to that, just because I probably ran up to you on the first few days of school and started talking to you and that sort of thing. But I also had people when I was a freshman that did that. Like I remember Jose, Jose Flores, he's really cool, and he's really good about that, like talking to people he didn't know, even if they like weren't music majors or anything. And again, Hayden was someone who like talked to me, and like Bill talked to me, Evan talked to me. There's a lot of upperclassmen that did. So that's something I kind of continue to do. And also like outside of like those situations, I'm trying to think of a good example. But yeah, for the most part, if I see new people, I like introduce myself, that sort of thing. Depending on the situation or like where it is, if they're like alone, or if it's like at a party, sometimes I'll ask if they like want to sit by us. And again, this can be harder by people that I'm intimidated by, but I've also duo teamed it before with other folks like Jose. When I've been nervous of talking to like certain people. We were at a jam session once, and there's this one guy there, this horn player, and he was really good, and we were all kind of in the same age group, but it was one of the first few that I went to. And again, like I noticed when people are by themselves, and I noticed that he was like sitting by himself and like that sort of thing. And I don't know, I just like wanted to like talk to that person. I'm like, we were in like a circle with our like music peeps, but Jose was with me, so I was like, Jose, I think we should ask that horn player that was in the house band to talk to us. So Jose just like goes like right up to him, and like I grabbed like another chair, but of course he like immediately like joined us once we asked, you know, because again, like most people want to be a part of like the conversation, or even if like they're sitting off alone, or like sometimes they themselves are like uncomfortable with joining in. So anyways, that's me just saying I enjoy reaching out now, or at least I'm better at it than I was before, or at least one of the things that I've like picked up. Even like people that come and visit like during Jazz Fest, I tend to be more social then and like talk to strangers. So again, part of it depends on the environment and how comfortable I am with it. Because I've also noticed too, again, it's the music environments that I feel the most comfortable in, especially with like the Irian community, because I feel like we have a very tight community. Sometimes if I'm at like a party with a lot of like non-music majors, I don't always connect as well, because I think maybe there's like less to relate to, or they just have like different personalities and stuff. I'm gonna sip some water, think about where to go to next with this. So that's kind of what I wanted to go through the social anxiety stuff. Sorry for that large amount of information at the beginning, but I was determined to do some research this time. So hopefully you found all that research interesting. Fortunately, this is going well. I wasn't sure how long getting through the social anxiety stuff would take. So we have plenty of time to get to the performance stuff that I wrote out. And yes, thank you, Kyle, for checking the sound. I saw you, Kat, and I also say hi to you. Facebook also tells me the other people that have joined, so I've been kind of keeping track of that. So thank you to everyone that joined and is watching silently without saying anything. Again, I like the people who silently watch to say things because it makes me feel less alone. And if you guys write good comments, then I can read them. So I like it when you do that. But before we go into the performance anxiety stuff, I want to put in the website that I used, akfsa.org. The website. akfsa.org. Okay. There we go. All right. So hopefully that shows up on the website that I just put in. That has to do with all the social anxiety information I read off at the beginning. Most of the information I got from that site, and I know it's reliable because I got a pamphlet from Elmhurst's Wellness Festival, and that pamphlet was actually in regards to that site. So if you do experience social anxiety as a mental illness, I recommend maybe just like checking that out, because that's where I got a lot of the information from for it. So you can take a look at that if you want. Most of it is kind of like what I went through, but they have more information that I didn't go through for it because I didn't have a ton of paper to write notes down on. But yeah, I'd recommend checking it out if it's of interest to you. But now we're going to get into the performance anxiety stuff. This one I didn't do any research for. Oh, and then I also forgot to say this, but since I posted in the college page, we had some non-music majors join. So I'm trying to kind of focus on the non-music people a little bit, just so they can have something to relate to, because I notice these tend to just be music related most of the time. So for performance stuff, again, this is probably going to be pretty music heavy. Sorry, non-music people. Hopefully you can still take something away from it though. But I'll talk about I'll talk about public speaking a little bit at the end, just so hopefully you guys can have something to relate to. Yeah, we can just hop right into it now. Oh, the other thing I was going to say too, I'm currently in my kitchen doing this live broadcast, but my grandma recently moved in, and she's like 96 years old or 94 years old, I'm not sure, but she kind of has like a set schedule, so she might come down here at like noonish, depending on this is still going. When she comes down, I might have to relocate, because for the most part I could get the rest of my family to just like stay clear. I can tell them to like go to other rooms and stuff and like don't come downstairs, because this is the only room where we have somewhat good lighting. But she's just gonna do whatever she wants to do, so I might have to go upstairs, or if she comes down and I don't notice her right away, there might be a lot of yelling and me explaining what's happening. So that's the other thing. But yeah, we'll hop right into this. Yeah, so performance anxieties, music majors, you get it. Yeah, where do I begin? That was my first note that I wrote down. Where do I begin? So I think, I'll focus on my freshman years first, because I think that's the most maybe stressful part of it. So yeah, as far as the performance stuff goes, especially in my freshman year, it had a lot to do with my depression, because at least now I would say that I'm not depressed, or I don't experience depression. But certainly when I was a freshman, I did. And with that, performances became more of a measurement of self-worth. And if it's like that, then most of the time you're never going to do well, or you're never going to be satisfied. I think we'll start with kind of like the combo experience and all of that. So yeah, as a freshman, and again, in comparison to upperclassmen and that sort of thing, not that any of the upperclassmen were like mean by any means or bad people, because again, I had a very fortunate environment, but at least with the depression sort of thing and having it be a self-worth, I was always worried, not so much about like audience people, but getting like judged by your peers, having them like think badly of you, or like if you're not a good musician, then they wouldn't want to like hang out with you and that sort of thing. And I know for one of the groups that I was in, one of the upperclassmen, they didn't know I was in that group, and it doesn't bother me now, but back then, somebody that I knew trash talked one of the groups that I was in without knowing that I was in it. But the consequence of that was just that it ruined like that whole experience for me, because after that I didn't like want to be in that group anymore. I was constantly embarrassed about being in that group, just because all I thought about was like what he said, and it made it like super like stressful. But yeah, it essentially ruined that group for me for the rest of the year, just because I was like constantly worried that everyone like hated me, or like that sort of thing. So that's like more on the extreme side. And again, I'm not mad at that person or anything. I've told that story before too, so he knows. We like talked it through, so it's cool. But unfortunately, it's one of my experiences, so it's something that I just have to talk about, especially if it affects you like that negatively. But it's cool now. So yeah, that would be kind of like the freshman experience. And again, a lot of these have to do with like depression and like that sort of thing. I'll go into like the lessons next. So So I was easily intimidated as a freshman, I would say, or like constantly like worried about playing for other people. And again, no one was like ever mean or anything, but I remember in some of Mike's lessons, I tell this to people because, you know, when musicians get like stressed out or they're in like intense playing situations, even like in college when it's a new experience and stuff, or they don't feel like they're doing well enough. But I know like during set, there's a couple like some of my lessons with like Mike Pinto, and again, this is like in no way his fault. It's like all just like in my head. But we were like playing, and again, most of these situations I was like going into, like I was like very depressed, or like not feeling good, and and I went into like some of like Mike's lessons, and we'd be playing a tune, and I would just like, oh God, I just remember like playing like the head wrong or something, or I just like messed up like a little part of it, and I just like started sobbing while we were playing, and we finished the tune. We kept going. So it'd be like stuff like that. Again, it's not anything that he does. Most of the time, it was all just like in my head. So that's even just like in like a faculty lesson, and he's always like a sweetheart about it. He'd like be like trying to like pep talk me like while it was happening, give me like encouragement and advice, or like ask if I wanted to like talk about it. Again, that's kind of straying. I'm having difficulty talking about this because I'm trying to not go too much into the depression aspect and more to stay on like the performance anxiety aspect, but they kind of go hand in hand. But yeah, that's a different story because again, it goes more into the depression side. But again, he's a good person. So, you know, embarrassing situations, crying in front of your faculty member during a private lesson. That can also be extended to last semester, spring semester. Mike was out, so Chris Siebold took over some stuff. And I was dealing with some other things that were like going on, but I remember during my first Chris Siebold lesson, it was like the same thing. I started sobbing like halfway through it because I just got really stressed out. It was funny because he didn't notice right away, and whenever those situations happen, I'm not like loud about it. I just like start crying while we're playing. So of course we just kept going for a while, and all of a sudden he noticed like halfway through it that I was like sobbing, and he's funny. I love Chris. He just like looked up, and of course like as like a lessons instructor, and like I've taught private lessons too, where like students have been going through like very stressful like situations, and just like playing, even if it's in like a lessons format, just adds like another level of like anxiety, and you just like kind of lose it. So as an instructor, you like don't know what to do. He was just like, so his first reaction was just like for Mike Pinto at this point as a senior, or sorry, as a junior, this was like standard daily procedure. Chris, this was like he was like, what? But he was fine. He was really cool. He was really funny. It's like first reaction. First thing he said was just like, I didn't think my playing was that bad. So he was really funny. Again, there's like other stuff that was going on at the time, and he was a total sweetheart. But again, it was, you know, one of the more embarrassing moments. Again, I won't go too much into like that other stuff, following through it, just because that goes into the more depression side of things and other stuff, and I'm trying to focus on the anxiety. So those are kind of like, again, examples for like lessons. A lot of music majors, I think, can relate to having to like sight singing finals. For non-music majors, one of the classes we take, you basically have to sing by yourself in front of the whole class, and that can be like very nerve-wracking to some people. And I remember being like very like nervous, or like you hear like your heart rate going crazy and like that sort of thing. So that can be like so that can be very frightening. Hi Trevor, I see your comment. And I definitely had a lot of anxiety stuff in relation to having to sing in front of the class. Again, just like smaller settings too. I had a lot of performance anxieties, even just in like the jazz classes that you have to take, because a lot of it involves like improv or like you're performing in the class, just in front of like all of your peers and like the professor and stuff. And it should be like a very like natural and like growing environment. But a lot of the time, you can get like kind of worked up or worry about what everyone else is like thinking. And at least in our class, we had a lot of like really strong players that always just seemed to like excel at whatever we were doing. So I was always like pretty nervous about that or like anxious. A lot of people get like really worked up too with juries. Again, for non-music people, that's where you like play in front of all the faculty. And that can be very nerve-wracking, I think, especially for like, well, I'm sure the classical ones are also intense, but for the jazz juries, they give you feedback while you're doing, well, post doing it. They give you feedback. So they don't just give you like a jury comment sheet, but they give you feedback like while you're like up there. So not only do you play, you then have to listen to all their comments, which I think is pretty cool and helpful now. But I know for the first few that I was doing, the faculty is always like so nice, because I mean they know when you're like freaked out and stuff. So I was definitely pretty freaked out as a freshman when that was happening. So a lot of their like feedback in the beginning, they were just like, oh, they're like, you're just like really nervous and like freaked out because you're also playing with like faculty members too. So I don't know, you're just like freaked out and nervous, and you just try to like prepare yourself as much as possible with all of that. But it doesn't always like work out well, or it takes time. Yeah, so those are kind of more the school situation stuff, again, that we can all relate to. At least music majors can. Again, I'm sorry if you're not a music major. So at least what I found in regards to performance anxieties, one of the things Tom Garling wrote on one of my jury sheets last year, I know one thing he said was just like to like put yourself out there more, just because again I always like was a little bit nervous, or even like at the beginning of the tune being like a little bit nervous before finally settling in. So one of the things like I remember him suggesting is just to like put yourself out there as much as possible. And when you're a lower classman or like maybe a little bit more nervous, that can be in anything, you know, whether it's your music theory stuff or like jazz classes. I'm sorry to say that we don't really have an Elmhurst College Jam session going on anymore, just because, I don't know, a lot of people are busy, I guess, or maybe you guys can harass Vinny and TJ into doing it. But at least when I was a freshman, it was more of a thing, which was cool. So that provided an opportunity to play at more regularly and freak yourself out and stuff. But anyways, Professor Garling is right in the aspect that the more you put yourself out there, the less anxious you get, at least in like other settings, or in like your classroom like jazz stuff. If you're more inexperienced or like more nervous or new or whatever, just like putting yourself out there or like volunteering to do things. Otherwise, you get better at it. I know for me this year, one of the things I started doing, I'm assuming you're referring to the Elmhurst Jam session, Trevor. Well, harass the rhythm section to do it. That's the problem here, the rhythm section. Anyways, one of the things I started doing, a lot of new people in jazz are often worried about going to like jam sessions, like the city ones, or like getting into that. So at least for me, I started going to one that my friends run. And every time you introduce yourself to a new experience, at least for me, I'm aware of the fact that I'm going to be really nervous or like really anxious. And the first jam session that I went to, that was like a city one, was like a disaster for me. That was probably the most anxious and nervous I've ever been. It wasn't even, don't even want to say like a performance, but just like a performance situation. Oh my God, I just like completely freaked myself out. That was definitely like the height of it. I was like listening to like the house set, and like I had friends come with me too, and that's a good thing to do too if you go to jams, bring your friends with you. But I don't know, I was just like sitting there and I was listening to the music and I enjoyed it. And again, like everyone was like super nice and encouraging, but my level of anxiety just kept growing and growing the whole time, like to the point where like all my muscles and like bones just hurt, or like sore just from like the amount of anxiety that I was like just freaking out about. And of course I still got up and played, but it was like the worst I ever played. So on the bright side, that means I can't get any worse than that. At least I hope so. Yeah, I like completely, it was a tune that I really liked too. Oh my God, I like counted it off and I was so anxious, like I forgot like the whole thing. I was so freaked out. But yeah, it was a terrible experience. I saw Kenny earlier in this chat. He was trying to be so nice and like talk to me and be like social. But the most important thing about that experience is that I went back and kept going back, because that first time was terrible. But even if that first time's terrible, it doesn't mean you should stop. And I talked to Kenny a little bit about it, and he was super cool. And one of the things that helped in the performance anxiety section, especially with that, is to be really social beforehand. So I think the next time I went, I like talked to him actually quite a bit before I played, to the point where I forgot that I was anxious. And then I went up and played, and I think it was fine. I don't really remember. It's harder to remember from that long ago. So yeah, that's my take on that and the whole jam session thing. At least in regards to that, anytime you go into a new performance situation, like you're always going to be nervous. But ideally, the more you do it and the more you put yourself out there, the less stressed you get. I know for me, again, people are more nice at that session. But I know once I go to ones with like even older adults, you know, that I'll probably be freaked out again, and it'll probably be terrible again. But I don't know, that's just something you have to accept, and eventually it goes away. And I can attest, since I've done that before, where I would have been really anxious about like school performances, I'm not, or where I would have been like really anxious about like juries and that sort of thing. I'm just not, like sometimes I'm worried about certain things, like I'm like, I don't really know how that part of the tune is going to go, because we didn't really talk about it, but I know that it's going to like work out, and it doesn't really make me panicky or anything. And then the other thing I think I'll talk about too, at least in regards to performance anxieties, one of the groups that pushes me the hardest and that I'm the most stressed out to be a part of is Gretsch. Because that has a lot of guitar players in it that are all really good. Yeah, and that's just where I feel like the most stressed out. And I know like last year, and it's in most of the time too, the songs we do tend to be in a more fusion vein, and I'm like terrible at fusion. And all the guys that I play with, they just like always sound amazing, or they always sound like really good. And I hate the way I sound in that group, because I think I sound terrible. I think I'll kind of start off a little bit last year, because this year's been good, but last year was my first year in that ensemble, and I was like definitely freaked out, and I basically cried every time like I soloed in that group post solo. Most of the band members were never aware of that, but the director definitely was, so Mike was always aware of that. And I talked about it at that group with Mike a lot, just because I was always stressed out all the time and like freaked out and paranoid, because I didn't want to like let anyone else down, and I was terrified that I was like terrible and didn't sound good. But again, most of the time that's all in your head. Probably one of the more funny aspects was Mike didn't say we were having somebody visit, but we had like an incoming student like visit. And I had just sold on something that I thought was bad, so I was sobbing silently like I normally do. And then all of a sudden we had this like incoming student like come in. Me and Mike, I think it's hilarious now. Back then I didn't think it was funny. But him and like his parents were just, Mike said they were like staring at me the whole time, and Mike said like the mom was like glaring at him because again he didn't do anything like mean or anything. I was just depressed and in my own world and unhappy with my performance ability at that point in time. And we talked about it afterwards. Again, now I think it's hilarious. But Mike said he was like getting looks from like the parents, like what kind of director are you? But actually, when I first joined Gretsch, Chris Siebold was the director for it when I joined because Mike had a kid, so he was out. But Chris Siebold was directing it, who again was a really nice guy. But I was so intimidated in that setting just by the players that were in there at that point in time. I was extremely intimidated by Chris too, just because these were all good players. I was new to that group and it was like halfway through the year. So I was very freaked out. But Chris is a good guy, and for some reason or another, he liked me a lot, which is very nice. But he always gave me a ton of like pep talks because I definitely got worked up in Gretsch. Again, most of it was in my head. It was never that anyone was like mean to me, but I was just like freaked out and stressed all the time. Anyways, now that whole ensemble is a lot better for me because I've gotten comfortable in it and putting myself out there more. I still think I'm terrible in a lot of the playing situations for it. But I try to channel my inner Chris Siebold for it because, again, he gave me a lot of pep talks and just being more confident with how I sound or how I want to sound. So there was this one tune we were doing at a concert that Mike really wanted me to solo over. Originally, I asked him if I could solo on it just because like I wanted the practice because something I got used to doing in Gretsch was asking to solo on specific things, even if I knew I was going to be terrible at them. In practice, not in a performance. But this one he really wanted me to solo over, and it was an unknown new tune. And Cole was soloing on it beforehand, and of course he like sounds great and like amazing. And every time I soloed over it, I thought it was like trash. So I was getting like really stressed out about it and playing on it, and I was like so worked up all the time. But Mike really wanted me to, so he like kept convincing me to that I should in lessons. I kept like working on it on my own, but just like I just didn't think it was like sounding good in like the ensemble setting. So when we were gonna do it for our performance, me and Mike had like one last powwow like right before it, like debating, because I didn't want to play on it, but he wanted me to play on it. Anyways, the performance for it actually ended up going really well for it, at least when I sold on it. And this relates back to my Chris Siebold stuff, because he always gave me pep talks and like believed in me, and I was really anxious about playing on it. But one of the things that he told me, I guess is basically not that he was basically just like not giving a fuck. Sorry for the language, but just about like in your own head, like what other people are thinking, or like experiencing, or just like playing. Because if you're like constantly like freaked out about like whatever everyone's thinking, then you're like never gonna sound good. Again, not that you shouldn't listen to the music, but at least with that, I remember Cole and like Vinny and other people and Mike, they were all like really happy for me like after that performance, just because they said that was like the best like I'd ever played on it or like sounded, just because like I don't know, I just got like so mad just about with being like anxious all the time playing on it and stuff. Yeah, so it ended up going well. Cole was just like, I love Cole. He's so supportive. He like gave me a hug. It was great. But yeah, that's definitely the best I ever sounded on it. Then I had to play on it a couple of times after that for other situations, and it did not go well for me again. And I was like really unhappy with it again. But that one time it was really, oh sorry, but that one time it was really good. And I was unhappy again. But that one time it was great. So yeah, that's like channeling the inner Chris Siebold was basically my goal for it. So yeah, that's kind of my comments, I guess, with like the performance anxiety stuff. Yeah, you're always going to be like nervous, I think, but the more you put yourself out there, the more it goes away. And you get less nervous or less worked up about situations, or if you get used to playing with certain people a lot or working in a specific group, then it's like not as bad. But yeah, everyone too has points where they completely like bomb something, and like I get really unhappy with myself when that happens. Like if I've been working on a tune, but like things just like happen, you know, where you're in a performance situation or a jam session or whatever, and like things just happen and stuff gets messed up. It's not always your fault. So don't always blame yourself, because I definitely do that sometimes. Or you just get like freaked out or nervous while you're playing. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh God, where are we? That's happened to me before. You just like make yourself like anxious while playing. So yeah, that's kind of my take on the performance stuff. Again, anyone who's watching this, I like it when you guys comment. Please comment so I can read some insightful people say cool things unlike me. Otherwise, I'm going to be in the process of wrapping this up. So yeah, so that's kind of the performance stuff. Again, if you have anything to say on it, you totally should. But I'm going to talk about the public speaking thing, just because, again, I'd like to try to incorporate some non-music majors in this. So this last semester, I took the oral communications, well, it was advertising, but the tag with it is oral communications, I think. Basically what that means is some class, I think Vinny's doing like a theater class or something for it, but one of the classes I have to take fills the tag for it. And that usually what it does is it involves like a ton of like public speaking or presentations. And I know in my advertising class, there's a lot of people that were always stressed out about talking in it. Because you do a lot of presentations, like weekly presentations, either in a group or like by yourself. So if you're a non-music major, you might not be surprised just based off of what you heard from that other stuff, is that I don't necessarily get nerves with public speaking. And I think part of that is for the music stuff. As musicians, for the most part, you're always putting yourself out there, you know, in different like situations. At least if you want to try to get into like the music scene at all, you just like have to put yourself out there whether you want to or not. And having to do things like sing in front of a class repeatedly every week, that certainly does it. Or like putting yourself out there at jam sessions or like juries, like those are all highly like stressful situations for like the first time. So public speaking, I found I didn't have as much of a problem with. You know, the other flip side with that too is something that helped a lot, and that some of you guys are aware of, is I've hosted mental health awareness events in the past, and those I did a lot of like public speaking for that stuff, where I was talking about very personal experiences to myself, and I've always hosted them within the music community at Elmhurst and Arian. So I think that helped a lot, at least with being more comfortable. But I talked about a lot of personal stuff, and I definitely started sobbing during that stuff a couple times, you know, because it's serious and emotional, and you kind of learn to like work through that. But yeah, as far as the public speaking, just like in front of a class for presentation, I as stressed after that. And like some of my colleagues who definitely suffered from like talking in front of a class or like being really nervous. But one of the things I find, just in maybe like your presentation settings, or if you have to do some form of public speaking, as stupid as this sounds, I take a lot of the things that they say in school and use it to my advantage. Or even just giving myself a pep talk beforehand, you know, like memorizing what you're going to say or the key points helps a lot. Because then you're not like fumbling awkwardly through your notes. I also, regardless of what it is, I always try to find something when I'm talking that I find interesting. And then I try to recreate my passion and excitement for it when teaching the rest of the class about it. You know, before I go into it, I'll be like, oh, this is something I found like really interesting. And I hope you guys do too, like while I'm talking about it, you know, said presentation. People have seen me do presentations normally know that I kind of do jokes sometimes that usually go over pretty well, or I say funny things that usually the class seems to enjoy for the most part. I don't think I think they're mostly hits. I'm gonna say they're hits. I don't have misses. I'm perfect. But yeah, that's something I think I find helps a lot. And just remembering, again, it always sounds like stupid to say, but knowing that you're like the expert, you know, and regardless of such, the rest of the class doesn't know what you're talking about per se. So it's like your job to teach them or whatever. So that's definitely something that I've helped with public speaking. That doesn't mean I never like get nervous, because nerves always come up. But at least I'm not freaking out. Sometimes for the first few, even in the advertising class, like maybe like the first 1 or 2 times, sometimes I'll notice, like I'll hear my heart rate like increase, and my thoughts aren't necessarily panicking, but I can hear my heart rate increasing, or I'll notice like my hands shaking, or like my voice is starting to shake. But most of the time those presentations are so long that you just have to like keep going through them, you know. So you like do it more and it like gets better. So the nerves will always be a thing, like I said, but I think that other stuff has definitely helped me a lot. I'm gonna sip some more water. But yeah, that's my takeaway, at least on public speaking. And also too, I just always try to be supportive in the public speaking stuff, or when I witness other people doing public speaking stuff, just because it's good to create a supportive environment, I think. This water tastes good. So that's kind of what I have to say for all the social anxiety and the performance stuff now. I know we had a couple more people join. I'm going to take a look at these comments, maybe, or it's from Kyle. You'll just have to give me a moment to read through it. I don't have a co-host, so I can't have them talk while I do it. Okay. I'm just going to read it out loud. Hopefully you don't mind, Kyle, but you posted it, so there you go. Something that gives me performance anxiety is when I wait to perform or do a final. The longer I wait, the longer I tend to get nervous and more worrying thoughts enter. How do you suggest I avoid this? What I mean by waiting is waiting past the time you're supposed to perform. Yeah, so it's like the waiting, you're like freaking yourself out. Well, one of the things I kind of like to do, well, it's harder too with waiting, because I kind of gave you an example, at least with that jam session, which I'll go back to that and use it to address. At least for juries, one of the things I like to do for juries, and kind of varies. The jazz ones, at least, if you ever plan on doing them, Kyle, they're always on Monday, which is like reading day, meaning you shouldn't have any other finals going on. So I always like to schedule my final, if it at all possible, being first. Like I'm the person that, sorry, not final, jury. I'm the person that schedules my jury first. I'm the guy that goes at 8 a.m. and annoys all the music faculty by being there early, you know. So at least with that, again, I like to go first, because then that takes away the weight. So like the morning of, ideally you've been shedding for it for a while and you feel comfortable. And the best way I can put it is most of the time, something, at least as far as like just performing anxieties go, if you get freaked out about how you sound, like sometimes you just have to be, if you're going into a performance situation, you just have to be happy with how you sound like currently. Like if you've been working, that doesn't mean you should like stop working, but sometimes you just have to be satisfied with how you sound at that moment and with your progress. Otherwise, you'll be freaking about yourself out about how you think you should sound. So yeah, at least for like that morning of, like I'll practice for a little bit and then I head over there and maybe like I warm up for a little bit beforehand, but then I like go like right on in, so I like that. I like going first. It's harder for like other stuff, because you can't always control like the wait time. That kind of has to do with like the jam session thing, because there was a whole house set. I don't know if I played first. Oh, actually, I think maybe I did play first. There's a house set, and then they took a break, and people were like talking and stuff. With that, like you said, like I completely freaked myself out during all of that. So yeah, in that situation, it was being social that like helped, like talking to people and like warming up to people. Because then if you're being like social or like talking to other people, then you're not like freaking out or like getting nervous. You're like focusing on different things. You're talking about football, I don't know, or whatever I don't know what people talk about, or food, pizza, I don't know. So I think that can help a lot. Is being social. I found that it's helped me quite a bit. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard to explain. But yeah, I get what you mean by the waiting. I don't want to be a jerk and be like, I don't know, there's nothing you can do about it. Everyone's anxious. But it's hard to like give good advice on that. Again, I suppose the more, at least as far as performing just goes, the more you do it, the less anxious you get, and that just happens over time, I think. Or again, as Professor Garling said, putting yourself in as many performance situations as possible, because the more you do it, the less anxious you'll get. New experiences are always rough. My conducting final was terrible, but it's okay because I did fine and I passed my independent study. I thought something said there was a new comment. What the heck? Well, whatever. Yeah. So I'm not sure if that helps. Hopefully it does a little bit. Yeah. I mean, if you're playing with other people, talk to like your combo mates and stuff. I don't know. Maybe just try telling someone that you're really nervous. If you like trust them, it can't necessarily go wrong. I don't think it's wrong to like tell one of your peers and just be like, I'm really freaked out about this. As you know, hopefully what you can tell from this whole live stream podcast thing is I'm a pretty open person. And usually your colleagues, I think, if they're good people, they will support you. Final, I'm not sure what you mean by final, if you just mean like test. I can't really comment on the whole test anxiety thing as much. As far as exams go, I don't really get nervous for them. At least beforehand, I don't. If I study a lot and I'm on the test and, it's like a hard exam, everyone's been through that, a pit of dread opens up in my stomach when I realize I'm going to fail. And sometimes I'm really freaked out post-exam and nervous and having a panic attack about it. So yeah, at least that's what I found has helped. Just be social and like talk to people, or your combo mates and stuff, or band mates. again, I think it's okay to say that you're really nervous. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's also important to remember too. I remember one of the things, again, like getting worked up with performances. I think it's always important to remember that your part in all of it is always part of like the greater whole, you know. So even though we might get like really worked up about soloing and that sort of thing, that doesn't necessarily mean anybody else is going to remember it. Hopefully that doesn't sound too bad, you know. But yeah, even just think about like all the performances that you've done. Like, can you tell me that you remember like what all your bandmates played or like their solos? Ideally, if your response is no, I don't remember, maybe you start listening more. But no, that's just like a headspace thing, you know. Oh, you just met the juries for it. Oh, cool. Well, if anyone else has comments reads Kyle's comment, feel free to comment in the comment section. Vinny just joined, so maybe he has some good old thoughts about it. Okay. Oh, you mean like for final, you mean jury for final? Okay. So not like test anxieties. Okay. But yeah, well, this kind of goes along with that then. A lot of that, though, is your part for anything is just one part to like the greater whole. So even if you're unsatisfied with your soloing ability, for the most part, nobody remembers that. What they want is for like the parts to sound good, for the ensemble to sound good as a whole. Or what most people care about is if you make them, obviously you're a horn player, so this might not apply to you as much. But for me, or guitar players or like bass players and drummers, like how comfortable you make the soloist feel like while they're playing, or like make other people feel comfortable when you're playing, and that sort of thing. They don't necessarily remember like how your solo is. I remember even like Mike saying too, just for other stuff. Okay, I'm glad it was helpful then at least. Well, I'll finish off this last thought, I think, just because this has been going for a while. You know, this has to do with just like playing in like the moment, you know, because again, what most people care about is how even if you're not happy with your solo, that again, that's just one part to like the greater whole. So for the most part, other people might not remember it, not to make it sound like a bad thing. We're all like that. We're all always thinking about ourselves, as bad as that may or may not sound. But I remember Mike was saying he's played gigs with Frank Caruso, and if you've heard Frank Caruso play, he can play fast. But I remember Mike said he's played gigs with Frank Caruso before. And he said he's had points where like he's gotten like anxious, or he's just been like, oh my god, like I can't play as fast as like Frank is currently playing right now. Like there's no way, like for like Frank's like solo. But yet what you have to realize is like that doesn't like matter, you know. And even like Frank says that too. Like obviously as a professional musician, you should be able to play fast if like the situation like requires it, or like you play like a fast tune, you need to be able to like play and get through it. But even when he's like playing fast or whatever, he's just like, so what, I can play fast. He's like, oh, he's like, it doesn't like really matter. So in the end, for the solo stuff, and other musicians have said this too, and I think it's harder for like college students, but to a certain extent, you know, it becomes like a choice. And Cole's been really supportive with me always, but I've noticed even more so like this last year, even like other people too when I'm playing, because you get like worked up about how if you don't know if you're supposed to like sound like somebody else, or you're like, oh, I think I have to sound like them. But I think I was talking to like Cole about that, or like playing faster, like doing like other stuff. I don't really recall, but he was just like, do you want to sound like that? He's just like, you don't have to sound like that if you don't want to. He's like, you can sound however you want to. Like however you want to. I'm messing up my words. You know, so at least with that, and it's harder to get to a point where you're comfortable and confident like that. But, you know, Roy Hargrove doesn't sound like Charlie Parker, you know. So to a certain extent, you have to pursue what you want to sound like. And it comes with time and confidence, I think. You know, yeah, you know, I understand Charlie Parker's important. But I'm not going to lie, I don't really listen to him at all. Sorry. I know it's important. It's important for the jazz tradition, but I don't know. I don't have a lot of emotional attachment to the bebop era. And if you do, that's really great. But I don't know. I'd rather listen to Roy Hargrove. Listen to some funky music. So yeah, that's where that comes in. But that doesn't mean it's not important to be able to play in that style if necessary. But it's also okay to pursue a different type of playing. So yeah, you said it was helpful, Kyle. So I'm going to assume I answered your question to perfection. I'm sorry if I didn't. But those are my recommendations, at least for, I don't know, inputs or performances. Be social, talk to some friends, go first if at all possible, and try to be satisfied with where you're at, and I think you'll be good. But I'm going to call this podcast here. I think my grandma got up. I heard a door close upstairs, and we've also been going a little bit more than an hour. Thank you to everyone that tuned in. Yeah, I think this was a good conversation. Don't be afraid to tell me if you liked this. If you're uncomfortable with dropping a comment, you can always just message me or tell me in person. I like it when you guys do that. It makes me feel good. Otherwise, if you do like this conversation and you watch it post-stream, you should still definitely leave a comment or something and tell me what you thought, because I look through the comments and I'll answer them and stuff. So don't be shy about keeping the conversation going. Have a happy New Year's Eve. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to go to Planet Fitness and hope that they're still open so I can get my workout in. But everyone have a good rest of your holiday, and I will either see you in January during J term or in February when we resume our classes. Bye.